Hey, welcome to Smoker Broker. I'm Robert Mesh, and I am the Smoker Broker. Happy Thursday to you. Hope everything's going great. Hope everything's moving forward. Hope everybody's starting to get into their new norm, whatever it is. Seems like every day it's something new, some type of change, and everybody seems to be adapting to that at this point in time. And that's fine. I am too. I have to admit, every week goes by, I get more positive about things. Uh, I mean, it's hard to be positive in a time where there's such a concern out there for health issues, but in the end we do move on, and that's what we're doing right now. You see more people out and about, see some of the stores have more people, see some of the restaurants are starting to opening back, so it's a slow crawl, but it is a step in what is considered to be the right
The
direction.
amount of margaritas I've consumed is absurd.
A lot of margaritas over there from Brent. That's good. There's nothing wrong with that. I don't think there's anything wrong with.
I'm supporting our local restaurants. That's why,
Yeah,
man.
there's a lot, for everybody out there in the show goes across the country on KVGI, and a lot of times some of the states don't have that luxury. We actually are delivering alcohol in the state of Texas, which is funny for a very Baptist dominated state to have delivery of such things. But we've had it, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with a little few margaritas here and there. So yeah, that's happening, and they seem to be doing better. It's tough to watch a crawl, come out and see people starting to get back into it. But I think the harder thing is trying to accept what the general public views as right and wrong. And this is the thing I've struggled with over the last, especially week or so. It's very difficult right now to decide if we have, if you're supposed to have a mask on, if you're supposed to have gloves on, what is the standard? Because I've gone into stores where hardly anybody has the mask on. They're not paying attention to the signs, and that's what it is that they're doing. But then you have some people that have the mask on and then they feel weird about it. So it's very tough right now. And I'm in that middle piece. I don't know what's right and what's wrong. And I think that's going to be a problem out there. I like to think I'm a fairly educated guy. I pay attention to everything. I try to do what I'm supposed to do, but I'm not so sure I know right now, because I have gone into places and I'm not sure what to do. I'm not sure what the right thing is. So it's a tough call. I think that's been the biggest struggle as we get back in. Where do we draw the line? Are we doing something right? Are we doing something wrong? Now, how paranoid can we be? How paranoid do we not have to be? That is going to be, I think, one of the most difficult things outside the virus itself for the next up and coming months. So, we've said this on many of the previous shows. There's no doubt the changes really become, the large groups just aren't going to happen for a while. Just not going to see it. And obviously a modified way of the way we do business, but we do move forward, we do keep going on, and those are not the worst things. So always have been starting off the show with some COVID stuff because it's been important. It is consuming a lot of our lives and daily things. We are starting to move a little bit out. Even I'm at the office today. I haven't done that in a while. Back at the office for the first time in quite some time, as far as working goes. I've been coming in and out every once in a while, but what's that?
The kids driving you nuts.
Yeah, I know. I gotta be. I'm proud of myself. I could have easily hit up here because nobody's been up at the office. I could have easily hit up here. I have a nice, couch and stuff, and I have chose to stay at home, and it's worked out just fine. The boys and Dina have done a good job, so I really can't complain. And I mean, today I really came up just because it's an important day for Keller Williams with their Red Day, so I thought I would show up. But by the way, for everybody out there, it is Red Day. This is a huge charity-driven day for Keller Williams that was created many years ago by one of the head culture icons in Keller Williams, and it's a really great thing because the Keller Williams all across the country and world get to a point where they have their associates to donate their time and donate things to worthy causes. And it's nice because coming back into Keller Williams, first time that I've been able to experience it in over 20 years. And it's one of the many things of why I like being back at Keller, because they have the machine to do these types of things. Whereas at my smaller firm, I didn't have the chance to do that stuff. So it's a good day. That's why I'm up here. I am in my red, trying to be very supportive of Keller Williams, but very good day for these people. Great culture being reinforced as always with this company. All right. So today we are going to talk about one of the most fundamental legal bases of real estate. And that's when we look about whether something's real property or whether it's personal property. Now, this is important because when you're going through contracts and people are leaving, there are certain things that have to stay at the house and certain things that can go with permission, but it's all in how it's expressed and how it's delivered as to what's going to be moving or not. So we're going to talk about this today because this actually causes a lot of problems in the contract world. We actually have issues with this because some people just make the assumption that something was theirs when it really was not theirs, or it's not theirs anymore by the way they do it. As always, I'm joined by some of my guys. Well, at least one of them. I don't know where the other one is. David's having some trouble with the video. So I got my right-hand man there, Brent Holberg. He's one of our main co-hosts, and he politely just jumped on because David was having problems. It was only going to be me and David today, but that was nice of Brent to join us. And David's trying to get in. I don't know if he can or not, but if he shows up, then that's great. We'll definitely put him in. But, I can't do the show by myself. I like to have the guys on. They do a better job of running the show than I do anyways. And they remind me of things that we've talked about over the years. So always good to have them on. Brent serves the entire Dallas-Fort Worth area, and pretty much he'll go just about to Texas. Yeah, too far for
Not so much.
Yeah, he's lying. He'd go.
Yeah,
right. Yeah. So always good to have him. Brent's up in the north section of town, up in the McKinney area, but again, all of Dallas-Fort Worth. Our hub office is in Frisco, Texas, right past the Star. People see the Frisco area. We're not too far. For those that kind of follow us, we're about 2 miles away from the Dallas Cowboy Star. So that's kind of cool too, that we're in the heart of Dallas-Fort Worth and of course, Frisco, Texas. All right. So back into the real property, personal property conversation. It's one of the most fundamental pieces, and it's great for agents to understand how it works, but it's also, this show is probably more important for your clients than it is just you, because they're the ones that really need to know what they're allowed to take and what they're not allowed to take. Because some people make some really poor assumptions, and that's just not the way it goes. So one of the things I want to start off with is one of the most annoying pieces of this is what some realtors do with their lack of understanding of real property versus personal property. So here's one of them. The contract that we have in Texas, which is the residential 1-4. Okay, there he is. Hey, David, how's it going there, brother?
He's muted.
You unmuted there? You back?
A little technical difficulty there, but I'm back.
I thought we were going to have to send the ambulance over there. I thought something happened.
Welfare check.
With all the Zoom meetings we've been having around here, we were bound to have some kind of technical problems eventually.
I told Mark, I go, that's not like David. We might want to call 911. He's probably down. So anyway,
yeah, good to see you guys.
David Tanner down there. He's my guy out of Coppell. He does a great job throughout the North Texas area too. He's a good co-host as well. So good to have you.
All right. Thank you.
So we one of the things that we're talking about a real contract. So in Texas, we use a residential 1-4, which is the contract we use for 4 dwellings or less, for those that don't know that. But what's important about it is to understand what type of contract it is. It's amazing how many veteran agents don't know how, what kind of contract it is. And the fact is, it is a real property contract. Oh, hang on. I'm too loud over here. I can hear myself. I don't like that. It's a real property contract. All right. And if it's a real property contract, that means that you can only put real property in it. Real property is what's being moved in it. Right. Mm-hmm. So common mistake we see in special provisions, you'll have someone put something like fridge to convey with property sale. All right. This is a common clause we see put by an agent in the special provisions clause, which is an awful segment of the contract. Whoever put special provisions in a contract should be shot. That is a lousy, it's just inviting somebody to break the law. There's very few opportunities for someone actually having to use it. So it's begging for someone to screw something up. So I hate that provision. But sometimes you'll see someone put something like refrigerator to convey with property. Now, there's two things that are wrong with that type of comment. One, since when did somebody give you the availability to talk like that? Since when did someone say, since when did you start talking like, I convey this, I convey that? You know, Brent, who are the people that typically talk like that?
Lawyers.
Lawyers.
And we're not lawyers. We can get a lot of trouble for acting like a lawyer. So that's one thing that's really wrong.
Right.
Is you got an agent that makes up their own clause, and now they're practicing law, which they can lose their license for in the snap of a finger if somebody catches them. All right, so that's the first thing. And that's embarrassing enough. But then you get to where it's even more embarrassing in the fact that that is a real property contract. And you just put a piece of personal property in a real property contract. There are some courts that would argue that it might not be a valid contract because you put personal property in it. That's not where it goes. So that's the second embarrassment. It doesn't go there. And the third embarrassment, which is the worst part about all of this, they actually have its own form. They have a separate form to move personal property. Throughout the rest of the country, it's a bill of sale. Here in the state of Texas, it's a non-realty addendum. A non-realty addendum is how we move the personal property. That fridge should have never showed up in the real property contract. It should have been on a non-realty addendum or a bill of sale, moving it from one person to the other. This happens all the time. Someone right now in the state of Texas is actually drafting a contract where they just put that ridiculous clause in there. That is not where it goes. So that's the first piece in understanding the legal technicalities of what the contract does and how agents can manipulate it and how the general public can misperceive it. Now we're going to talk about the ones that really cause trouble with these things, because there's some doozies and there's some ones that you actually probably wouldn't think about. In fact, before I get into it, I'll let some of the guys talk about some of the ones they know I'm about to talk about, and then we'll talk more in detail. So, David, what are some things that show up on this conversation that cause us issues?
Well, a real common one, and at least one I've run across a few times, is the mounted TV on the wall.
Yeah, sure. There's a lot.
Right. I mean, a lot of times they'll want to keep the TV, which is fine, but what they don't realize is that bracket, that TV mount, stays with the house.
That's right.
I mean, unless that's considered real property, unless you clarify that up front. I mean, that you're going to remove that. But then when you do, then you've got a big hole to fix.
So that's one. We're going to talk about that. Brent, what are some other ones?
Curtains and drapes.
Curtains and drapes. You wouldn't think, right?
I'm going through it right now on my deal.
Yeah.
So, not a big deal. And I don't know who screwed up, but I'm just going to assume myself. I always go through one and walk them through and I say, hey, are you taking anything here? And either I didn't remember or they didn't tell me. But now I was like, oh, God, I forgot about it. Luckily, it's cool. But I was like, I might have to be paying for some drapes.
So this is what I love about my guys. Brent's a senior guy. He knows what he's doing. He's an expert in residential real estate.
Ceiling fans is another one.
Yeah. And here he has it where he's 10 years into this and he has made a mistake. He has forgot that those drapes can be an issue. You know, what's really tough is that on the drapes and on the curtains, it can be like you sewed them for your child, like for your son's room or your daughter's room. That still is not yours. And that's where this conversation becomes very unique, because you're like, most people would be like, oh no, that would never go. It absolutely could possibly go with the sale. So this is very difficult. Now, I will admit the common sense of the curtains is annoying, because what we're going to talk about in a little bit, and David kind of hinted at it, a lot of this breaks upon the fact that when we take it down, is there a massive gaping hole?
Right.
The curtains themselves don't have a massive gaping hole. It's the rod,
yep.
right?
That's
but
right.
The reason is that the rod was there for the curtains. And because of that, they're supposed to stay with the house. So this becomes a very uncomfortable situation. I see Deb's out there watching. She talked about grandma's antique chandelier. That's on the list. We're going to talk about that chandelier. That shows up quite a bit. Go ahead.
Well,
Deb.
and I know you'll probably I know you'll probably cover this eventually today, but that's why it's so important when we do that listing presentation and we first meet with that seller. You walk through that house and you make darn sure that anything they want to keep, you remove it before you even list it, because as soon as that potential buyer sees that, they want to claim it.
So let's just go ahead and talk about it because it's the beginning piece of it. That is what we do. When we go in to a listing presentation, good real estate agents start checking out the house and they start asking the questions. They start asking like Deb said, that chandelier, that's not a regular light. Do you plan on keeping or taking that? We talked about the TVs. We're going to talk about that in more detail in a second. We point those things out. I see Blair's out there watching us. He mentioned a hot tub. So a hot tub's a good one too.
Yeah.
Hot tubs can be a problem. Now, the hot tub's an interesting one because it depends on how it's hooked up. So let's say you have an above ground hot tub that's just placed on top of a patio that's plugged into the wall and has a water, the water tank is attached to the spa. That is personal property. That actually does not go with the sale of the home.
I would still clarify though.
But
I would still clarify because it's not worth the argument.
The whole show is about clarification because that's exactly what this comes down to, is clarifying what was going to happen with that anyways. So the hot tub, if you have one of those that the deck is built around the hot tub and the hot tub is secured into the ground via a slab and the water is piped into the house itself, then that is real property and it does stay with the house. So it depends. And those become the tough ones. The ones that depend, because sometimes they are and sometimes they are not. Deb brought up a good one. Yeah, it's funny. It's too bad Mark Cox isn't on.
Yeah.
He's got a good one about rose bushes and ornamental trees. So we're going to talk about rose bushes. Okay, Mark's got a good story on those. So I love that. And I have a very sentimental story I'm going to give on ornamental trees because I've got one of the ones, my agents always say, why are all these weird things happening to me? Well, look, I wrote the book on weird things. So trust me, I've got some weird ones. I'm going to share a couple of them today because that ornamental tree, that one was a problem for me big time when I first.
Another big one that's near and dear to your heart, Robert, is the outdoor grill.
Yeah, it sure is. Is it plugged in?
I've got a freestanding grill on our patio with the propane tank, right?
Yeah.
But it's not built in. It's not encased in anything. Unlike what yours, on the other hand,
it's built in.
It's built in.
Gas line that runs into it. So, and the fact that the gas line is built into the grill itself, if that house is sold today, then you better believe it's going in there. Well, I love the participation we're getting today.
Yeah.
So Melissa talked about the storage shed. That's a good one too. Yeah, the storage shed is, same kind of conversation as the spa. If the storage shed is in fact on a slab and it's attached to the slab, then that shed is staying. However, if the shed is on some type of wooden block and it's a portable, it can be taken because it's personal property. In fact, I just reminded myself of another one that I didn't have on here was the play set. So we're going to talk about that too. So the storage shed's a really interesting one because a lot of people make the assumption that it's going with the house and there's a possibility that it will not. So that's a good one too. What are some other ones to see? If
water softeners.
Yeah, so Deb has a good one too. If it takes a screwdriver or a shovel to remove, it should stay. That and added by a big gaping hole. If there's a big gaping hole and you pull it out, most people would argue that it needs to stay. So let's go back to one of the examples that David mentioned on the TV, specifically flat screen TVs. So the general rule of thumb is the J hook is embedded into the wall, right?
Yep.
So the J hook is embedded into the wall, a 2x4. The TV slips on and off the J hook. In those types of situations, most courts would argue that that's personal property. It's not attached in such a way that it should stay. However, if you've done the old cutting the sheetrock, putting the TV in, picture framing it, dropping the wires behind it to make it look pretty, there are some courts that would argue that that has actually become part of the house and is now a fixture to the house and it should stay.
Well, how would that be any different too than the rod and the drapes? You know, like
Yeah. Well, remember, the rod is attached into.
that's what I mean. Like
Yeah.
if the TV can come off but not the mount, then how could you not take the drapes or the curtain?
Oh, right. So you could make the argument, why don't they say the same thing with the drapes versus the TV?
Yep.
We've had this conversation before too, because it does have the same mentality. If the holder's up there, it's for a TV, then why is it that the drapes aren't the same thing? So that has come up before too. My personal opinion, drapes should be taken off the damn thing. I don't know why, unless they're really expensive drapes, it really shouldn't be a conversation. So that's a good point, though. I've had this discussion about why is the mentality. This also comes up in the media rooms. The media room where the projector's on,
Yep.
a lot of people will argue that, well, the stand is for the projector. So, of course, it's the same thing. It's the curtains are the only one that they use different. That not only do the curtains have to stay, but the rod does too. And it's just not the same type of mentality. So it's very confusing, very gray, which is, the Texas Real Estate Commission well, I shouldn't say the commission. Well, actually, I should. They're the ones that set that. The TAR lawyers are the ones that put that forth. Very inconsistent sometimes, and that's one of them. It's been a long time. Should have been clarified years ago. So the TV. Now, what's funny about the TV is that the TV has a personal issue. Like a lot of people make the assumption, just like the curtains, that, well, the TV's mine. So when I'm leaving, I'm taking it. I'm like, it depends how it's yours. It depends how you put it in. So it's funny. We have an owner that removes it, and then they get very upset when we tell them you shouldn't have moved that. They're like, no, it's mine. Now, I am of the opinion that most sellers do that because they have some type of personal affiliation with the TV. My guess is they spent like 3 weekends putting it together because it sucks putting one of those things in. And now they feel like it's a part of their life. And because they wasted 3 weekends on it, they want it back. That's what my personal opinion is on why somebody gets pissed off when we tell them their TV can't stay. But this
to leave the TV,
What's that?
I tell my sellers to leave the TV because it looks horrible when you take it down anyways. The holes you have to patch up.
Right.
The TV's not worth anything now anyways.
It's fun. So it's funny you said that. There was a time and day where a TV was like $3 or $4 grand. You can get some of the most expensive TVs right now for like $200 or $300. I'm like,
Yeah,
that's
right.
Thing, I mean,
And I've actually, I've talked to people who actually were willing to just leave the TVs there.
well, honestly, in our household, I'm starting to wonder. Dina and the kids don't watch TV. It's all iPhone and iPad. The only time Dina and I watch the TV is when we watch like some type of Netflix, and that's only we're watching it because we're together, and it's too hard to watch it on the iPhone. But other than that, no one in our family watches the TV by themselves. So that's another thing you would never think would disappear. But I'm starting to wonder whether the TV has a place in.
Well, and I had a listing where the client, he had three big TVs, and I mean, like 50, 60-inch TVs in 3 different rooms. Well, he really didn't want to take them with him because where he was moving, he only needed one small TV. So he knew he had to leave the brackets there, the TV mounts. And even the listing agent said, you realize those stay. And I said, of course, those are going to stay. Well, he ended up buying 2 of the TVs off my client, like you said, on a separate addendum, a personal property. And then he just gave him the other one because he's like, I don't want to take it with me.
Yeah. Well, you bring up another problem that we encounter, and this isn't so much about real property versus personal property. This is kind of in just annoyance in transfer of possession. But one of the biggest complaints on transfer of possession is when the buyer comes in and all the holes have not been patched.
Yeah.
I think we mentioned this too. Now, very important for a lot of the agents out there to understand. And this is another lapse probably in the real estate commission as far as the contract goes and not being more clear. There is nothing in that contract that states that seller has to patch those holes. Now, you can argue that it says that it's supposed to be given in the condition when you put the contract. But the reality is the condition was those holes were there. They just had something in them. So It's very difficult. Now, don't mistake me. It is ridiculously discourteous to sell a house, pull all your shit down, and leave those holes in there and not do something about it. It's a courtesy issue. You would not want the same thing done to you, and yet I'd say 70% of the sellers, that's what happens. They take it down and they just leave it. It is a discourteous thing to do. You should try to patch those holes. Now, the problem with patching is if you patch, then you have to put touch-up paint.
Yep.
Now, I've had it, and this is the one that annoys me. I've had it where we actually did patch the holes up because we were being courteous, and then the person says, well, y'all need to go paint that. I'm like, oh, wait. We're thinking about paint. I go, you're lucky I patched the damn things.
Right.
I'm not going through there and repainting that entire room.
Leave the TV.
You can't just leave it,
Yeah.
right? Well, now we're talking pictures now.
Oh yeah.
Now we're
Yeah.
talking pictures and stuff. So this whole show is based on clarifying what's going to happen, because that's going to be the punchline to the show is you can actually take whatever you want as long as you tell somebody. Same thing here. If you're a buyer agent, always good to have a conversation with the listing agent to try to understand what is going to happen with the holes. Are they going to be patched? Are they not going to be patched? It should be discussed before we close so we know what the expectation is. We do not want to find out that we have a hole issue the day of close. That's just too inconvenient. It's too hard to deal with. So this is a common mistake.
Yeah, it's like, if with ceiling fans or the chandelier or whatever it may be, if you want to keep those things, that's fine. But you know what? Take them down before you list it, replace it with something else that you're willing to let go with the property, and then it's not an issue.
All right, so let's talk about that. Those are the two choices. You either take them down before anybody sees it, or number two, you flat out say in the MLS and probably at the house, make no mistake about it, these are going with us. Those are the two things that you can do. So everything we're talking about means nothing today, because as long as those two things are done, they can keep whatever they want. It's the silence that causes the problem. It's when nobody says a damn thing. And I'm going to tell you right now, there's only one person to blame. You can argue two, but there's really only one, and it's the listing agent. Yeah. The listing agent is the manager of that process. They are the ones who are supposed to be keeping up with what's staying, what's not going, and that did they put that in the paperwork, and did the buyer acknowledge it? They are the ones responsible. When this system fails, 9 times out of 10, it's because the listing agent wasn't on top of it.
Yep.
You can argue the buyer agent too, because they should be paying attention. But in the end, it's the listing agent that guides it.
Well, and how many times do we get a contract, as a listing agent, we're excited to get an offer, and you look through it and all you're looking for is that price and the terms, and you never look at that first page to show what's excluded.
So Brent just
that's right.
Exactly what was about to come out of my mouth. Sometimes the listing agent knows it's excluded. They put it in the MLS, but they don't put it in the contract because the buyer agent drafted the contract and the listing agent didn't pay attention.
Yep.
Now, some agents will be like, oh, well, it was in the MLS, so it's not going. That's not how that works. That's not how that works. If it's on that contract, you're screwed.
The price is in the MLS too. Doesn't mean that that's what they're paying for it.
That's right. And Brent, what did you say about curtains? Who's going to be buying curtains maybe?
Me.
Yeah, Brent.
Right. The only on that thing is if they had told me that it was excluded, then I'd buy them. But if they just decide at the last minute they're going to take them and there was an argument, it's kind of their problem,
Absolutely. Yeah, right. Not my fault. That's
and if you're really on your game, or an astute buyer's agent will ask up front, hey, was there anything that's being excluded? Because there are, like you said, there are times when a listing agent may not have put that in there. And then you may have triggered something. They're like, oh yeah, you're right. There are some things that are excluded.
You could argue that a very astute buyer agent does not put it in there knowing it's to be excluded, to use it as a negotiation tool.
Yeah, that's true.
That once it comes up, they're like, you already executed that contract. That's
right.
In there. Now look, everybody knows me is I'm a really fair guy about things. That's a real dirty trick, but there are some agents that'll do it to see if you're watching. And I got to admit, as dirty and low down as that is, I do respect the competency check, because I do respect someone saying, well, you should have watched that and you didn't. Yet now we have another problem. You don't want to help me. Maybe you should help me now that I helped you.
Yeah,
Forget
right.
about you doing that. So that sounds dirty.
Right.
That does come down to your competence. That's not a dirtiness issue as much as it is a competence issue. You know, if it was excluded on the MLS, it is the listing agent's job to make sure that that gets put on the contract. And it is tricky because once again, the listing agent's not the one who drafts the contract.
Yep.
98% of the time. But if you're not paying attention, you'll end up paying for some drapes, some speakers. Yeah, I can't count the amount of speakers I've paid for. I know it's 5 figures for sure. That's an easy one. It could be more than that, to be honest with you. But,
Blair brings up, what about gun safes? And I think that's a good one too.
Yeah, so gun safes. Gun safes go back into the
Like the hot tub thing.
Which one of you said that it's just too heavy? Just leave it.
Just leave it.
Gun safes are freaking heavy. I mean,
They are
heavy. So most gun safes are bolted into the cement. All right, a lot of them are bolted in. Those absolutely are real property, and they stay unless the owner makes an exclusion to them. Now, you can still have a heavy safe that's not into the ground. If it's not attached into the ground, it's personal property.
Yeah.
It's personal property, and you can do whatever you want with it. Okay. But when it's embedded, it's part of the house. It is considered a fixture to the house. Okay. Now, this is another thing when an agent's walking through, good agents ask about that.
Yep. Good
agents know that safe's expensive. They know something important's in it. A lot of times they want to know what's inside of it so they can negotiate see if they want to keep that stuff too. A lot of sellers will leave the safe because it's just so damn heavy. Then that brings me up another one. So I love the show because things just pop up at the top of my head. I think I had 6 things in here, and I've already come up with 8 things I wouldn't even think about. One of my favorites is so I'm trying to do a better job of takeaways on the show. This is a good takeaway. And I just thought about this when we were doing it. So this is a great negotiating technique that some people use. A lot of people, when they go to sell their house and they have a pool table, they have not played with that pool table either ever, or they only play with it 2 or 3 times, okay? They have no intention of taking that pool table. But I love it when they offer the pool table as a negotiation. So a lot of times the seller will be like, they'll get stuck in repairs and they'll say something like, tell you what, instead of giving you $3,000, why don't we just leave the pool table? A very savvy buyer agent would be like, hey, why don't you get lost and you guys pay to have that damn thing removed? And if you don't want to pay for it to be removed, you can leave it and I'll use it. Remove that pool table.
Yeah.
Now they have no intention of moving it. So I love it when an agent comes back at me. They're like, well, let's negotiate this. I go, what, on my behalf or yours?
Yeah.
I go, I'll do you a favor. I go, but I'm not going to let you take credit for it because I know how much it costs to move those damn things. So that's always a great rookie agent trick there. When you get suckered into, oh, we'll leave that for you. You're not leaving me anything. I'll take it off your hands.
Right.
Count this toward the negotiation. That's a real good tip.
I think there's one thing that's going to be coming up probably. It's going to, if it hasn't already, but smart home systems, smart home switches, light bulbs, all that stuff, smart doorbells that a lot of sellers have spent a lot of money on. And, they'll switch them out right before close. And so when the buyer comes in and says, hey, how come my home's not connected?
So let's go back to that because that kind of related to the fan conversation we had earlier. So some people, especially in Texas, have some really expensive fans. Like they have a Hunter fan or something, a really expensive one. And here's where this is where Brent was talking about the ladder, where they're told about things, but then they do something on their own and they think it's okay. So a lot of sellers, when they have that expensive fan, they take it down right before close and then they replace it with the builder fan, which was some brass cheap fan. And they're like, well, what's the matter? I replaced them. Like, no one told you could do that.
Right.
When these people paid for the house, they paid for that fan. They didn't pay for just the outside shell. They paid for the shell, whatever's attached to it. And that fan was attached. So that's a common mistake that
you didn't say you were going to exclude it.
That's right. You didn't tell me. And I made it very clear in the listing presentation.
Yeah.
Is there anything in here? Deb mentioned the chandelier from earlier. Yeah, you're a fool as an agent if you pass a dining room that has a chandelier and you don't ask about that. You can't possibly think that chandelier was built with the house. You can't possibly think a builder of all people spent that kind of money on that chandelier. You should immediately ask, hey, what are you doing with that? Same thing with everything we've talked about so far. The shed, the TVs, the spa. Those should be comments to say, hey, look, what are y'all doing with that? What's going to happen with this? What are you doing with this when it's done?
Yeah,
I will admit too, the spa is a good pool table. A lot of times they're like, well, I'll negotiate the spa with you. No, I know how much it costs to move that. You can leave it if you want. But a lot of people on the other side, no, you're taking that out. Same thing with that above ground pool.
Yeah.
I'm sure you will. I'm sure you will leave the pool. I don't want the damn above ground pool. And when you move it, I want you to put the sod back under it like you're supposed to have. Same thing with the trampolines too.
Yeah. Which
right.
Which they should. I mean, like we've got a big trampoline in our backyard, and underneath it, it's just all mulch, right? But if we were to move and take that with us, I would replace that grass.
Yeah.
Because there's a big gaping spot there,
So Blair mentioned about if it takes a screwdriver, it should stay. So if whatever was on, if it was actually into the wall to where that screwdriver made a gaping hole out of it, then yes. The screwdriver Deb's talking about is like if it's a little pitcher or something. If we're talking about a screwdriver or a drill that had to be pulled out of a stud and it left a big hole, that would be considered real property. The mere fact that you have to use a screwdriver doesn't necessarily mean that it has to stay. Deb's talking about where you actually go through and you make some really big movements to it and it actually comes down. It's easier phrased that if you leave a gaping hole in that wall, it was probably supposed to stay there. That's usually the rule of thumb. Now, kind of stepping hypocritically away from that, the speakers cause issues because it depends on how the speakers are attached. Like there are some speakers, like Blair mentioned, that are just on brackets. You just unscrew the speaker from the bracket and it's out. Okay. Those are all right. But a lot of speakers are embedded into the ceiling. Mm-hmm. And not only are they embedded into the ceiling, they're wired into the ceiling. Those are two reasons why that is probably real property. But there are some people who have the stand-up pedestals that the speakers are plugged into. Those are personal property. They're not attached in such a way. We talked about the media. So the media room is a big one. This is another takeaway from the show. We saw a lot of media rooms. The media rooms can be expensive. Some of those media rooms have 20 to 30K in them, maybe more. A lot of people make the assumption that the projector stays. 9 times out of 10, the projector is personal property because it's not attached to the wall. It's attached to the post in the wall. So the post is real property, but the projector is personal property. Okay. A lot of people make the assumption that it stays. That's a poor assumption to make. You should absolutely ask, hey, are the screen and is the projector staying? Is the equipment staying? Those are standard questions that should be asked when you're purchasing things in a media room. Okay. You can't just make the assumption there. That's a terrible mistake to make as a new buyer agent, where you make the assumption that that stuff is staying. That is not true. Most of the time the seller will negotiate it in, but to sit there and say it's going to stay, that's not true at all. Mm-hmm. I see where they talked about the security camera. So that's become a big problem. A lot of people, just like you were talking, Brent, about the ring and everything, same mentality. If the mounts and everything are into the wall or into the brick, they're staying with the house. The assumption is they stay with the house. Now, where you get kind of questionable is the control panel. The panel, because it's attached and wired in there. Some of those things can be like the nest can be taken off.
Right.
The air can. Those are the ones you got to watch, because if you really think about it from a practical matter, the nest really isn't attached in such a way. The controller, you could actually pop it off.
Right.
So that causes some confusion too.
Another big one is shelving. because that can be a pain. Because you're like, is that like the cheap little shelves? Is it just barely on there, or is it?
Well, like Blair was mentioning, talking about Deb stuff, the screwdriver, was it just in the drywall and it just pushed right out? He's coming up with some good ones. I got a comment about that one too. Because if it's just like that, it's not a big deal. But if that thing was in a stud and you pull it out and it pulled some wood out, chances are that it should have stayed. So very interesting conversations as to what we look at. You can see we're not even through, even a third of some of the things that cause us problems. One of our listeners also mentioned, what about Rover's grave site in the backyard? That's a city issue. I think you have to be careful what you do in your backyard. I know for a fact you can't bury your grandma in the backyard. There's rules against that. Now, on the dog and the cat, I'm not so sure, but I bet the city has a way of saying you have to pay $25 to dig a hole in the back for your pet. So we'd have to check on that one. So
there's so many different things nowadays, just like Brent was saying about the security, the Ring doorbells and the Nest, thermostat units and all those. Even those Ring doorbells, there's two different types. You can have the rechargeable battery type, and then you can also have it hardwired in.
Yeah.
So,
the punchline continues to be, you got to clarify.
Clarify.
Don't make the assumption that it's station. One of my favorite, anybody knows me. I always watch stupid B-rated movies from the 80s. And one of them is the one with Richard Pryor in Moving. That's a great episode about non-realty, when the guy goes through there and he's looking at the pool, and he everything they go by, he's always saying, well, don't get too used to it because we're taking it with us. And he starts laughing with the guy, and it's a big joke. And he talks about the entire house that way, even the pool. But then when they move in, the pool is actually gone. He goes, wait a minute. He goes, you said you were kidding. He goes, no. He goes, I said I was kidding about everything else. He goes, I said I was taking the pool, though. And he made the comment that, verbally he said this, but actually he did that.
What are your
go ahead?
No, what are your thoughts on when you have a buyer's agent? I want to say, buyer's agent, and they exclude on the contract real property, or not non-real property. I'm sorry. So like they exclude.
Oh yeah, all right. So that's a good comment.
Washer, dryer, and fridge.
So we see this. We see paranoid realtors. They go, well, more is better. That's not true in contract writing. More is better can get confused with double talking an attorney. So what Brent's talking about is sometimes an agent, and it's typically a newer one, they'll go in there and say the washer and dryer are excluded. It's already excluded. It's personal property. You don't have to write that down. You just put personal property into a real property contract. It didn't need to be there in the first place. It's already assumed that it wasn't connected in such a way. So that can be a problem. And the bigger problem when someone does that is not so much that they put it in the contract. It set a standard for now they have to clarify everything. Why did they clarify just the washer and dryer and they didn't clarify the nightstand or the desk? I mean, what point did they stop? That's where you get in trouble. You start doing it when you shouldn't have done it in the first place. And now you said, well, you did that one, but you didn't do that one. Now you owe me that you should have told me that we were doing this. That's the problem when you do that. So being a little too paranoid there sometimes can cause more issues.
You have time for your
oh my God. Wait, one thing I forgot about too, and you guys got to start reminding me about this. Before we head on today, I want to make sure I thank our sponsor, BPG Inspections, Martin Cooley. Martin, we do press the information out on the in the beginning of the show, and it goes at the bottom. You can see the scroll right now. So that goes throughout the whole show. But I actually like to have a verbal conversation about it. We have lots of choices as to who we use for inspections. And we always give multiple referrals for people out there because that's what we're supposed to do. But I'm telling you, Martin Cooley does handle a majority of the SWR group inspections. And there's good reason for that because the service he provides not only to the agents, but to the clients as well. Martin does a lot of things really well, but two things are great. From the customer side and the client side, he has a very good bedside manner. There's a lot of inspectors out there that scare the hell out of people, make it look like the whole house is coming in. Yeah. Martin point blank says, this is wrong, this isn't. These are warning things in here. Very easy to read the report. tells it like it is, doesn't concern me, scare you, says it, this needs to be fixed, this needs to be fixed. And from the agent side, he's great because his report for us is very easy to read because he clarifies red and blue issues. We know that if it's a blue issue, it's really just a voluntary, hey, I'm not concerned about this. But if he puts it on red, that means he was of the opinion that it should be fixed, whereas we were of the same opinion that we probably should do something. Now, we're not always going to say that his red items have to be fixed, but most of the time we do. So I like that about him as well. He's just very easy to deal with. He's very timely. He's been doing it for years. If you want his number, it's right down there, 817-401-3240. Again, 817-401-3240. As always, thank you for being a really good partner with SWR Group and being a sponsor of this show. There are a lot of people who watch the show. Show archive gets about 400 to 500 views a week. It continues to grow. It's become a consistent 400 or 500 number. So I love that. You have a lot of the Keller Williams Kingdom, a lot of the other brokerages out there that watch the show, which is actually very smart. It's not like money comes flowing in for the show. We basically run the show for cost for what we're doing, but it's the message that we're putting out and reinforcing our brand and our expertise in the field. So it's good for our clients. It's good for our agents and a lot of other people out there. We don't mind sharing that with everybody out there. All right, before we go, I want to tell one story that was a good one about this non-realty stuff because it's one of the most interesting ones I ever dealt with. So I had it was a house that had a beautiful palm tree out front, very mature palm tree. These can grow in Texas. In North Texas, it's a little tough because we do get a little bit of a freeze, and that can kill a palm tree. So you have to have care. It's very hard to have a mature palm tree in North Texas. You have to care for it. Okay, I mean, you have to have the bags on in the winter and the heaters and all that type of stuff. So had a client that had this in their front yard. Beautiful. It was really nice. They had lava rock, made it look very Phoenix looking. So I went under contract. This is one of those assumptions that it's a freaking tree, like a 7-foot tall or 8-foot tall palm tree. So there's never any discussion about this tree, not even a clarification, because why would anybody think anybody would do anything with the tree, right? So we go through one of the most smooth deals I'd had in a long time, which you learn to thank those, and be grateful for them. Closed on the house. Agent was great. I still remember her. She was so fantastic. So she calls, which anytime an agent calls after close, never a good thing. There's always something wrong. So she calls like 2 hours later and she says, hey, I got a problem. I'm like, what? What could be wrong? She goes, well, the tree's gone. I go, what tree? She goes, the palm tree. I go, like the 7-foot, not 7 foot, it's like 10 feet, I want to say. Like the big one? I go, you mean the Mexican palm in the pot? She goes, no, I mean the big one. I go, that's impossible. That would have taken a massive bulldozer and a professional arborist to move that tree. So I go, you must be mistaken. So I go over there and I'll be damned. Had it not been removed and patched over. So I call the buyer who's like halfway on their way to, Vicksburg. And I go, hey, enlighten me. Tell me that the tree got struck by lightning or something terrible happened to it, because the only way you could have moved that was with a professional arborist and a bulldozer. And the owner was like, those are exactly the two people we hired, and they're currently monitoring the transfer of the tree. So blown away by this. Now, I asked the obvious question. I'm like, why the hell would you move a tree? And come to find out, it was a sentimental tree that was given by their father, who had passed from a very rough cancer death. It had grown from just like this big to this massive thing. It meant everything to the family. Yet at this point in time, they are guilty of what?
Yeah.
Yeah. And actually, a felony theft, because the tree was well over the felony amount. Now, this is a tough issue. These are some of the things that we deal with every once in a while. Now, there was a good ending to this. We made it clear to them that they should have never taken the tree. Everybody understood why it was done. The buyer was very gracious. They're like, look, we don't expect you to bring that back, nor would we want it back. Just give us somewhat of an allowance to replace the tree. And the seller obviously was not a problem. But these types of things happen. It does say that the shrubbery and the trees are part of the house, that they actually stay with the house itself. Now we can go on forever on this. In fact, this will probably do the show again because there's so many things we can talk about. But those are some of the big ones that we enjoy. And the bottom line is this: you can take whatever you want. You just better tell someone up front that it's going. You either take it away so they never see it, or you tell them up front it's not staying. Okay, these are the fundamental things you need to do to save yourself a lot of trouble. Y'all, I hope you enjoyed the show. Thanks for watching. We'll be back next week. As always, continue to pump you with information about the real estate world. Y'all stay safe. We'll see y'all next week. Thanks again.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah.